Welcome to another episode of I Am Change podcast. My name is Rafiat Akiwande, and for today's episode, we're looking at Nigeria's democracy, people, power, and possibilities. Nigeria's political scene today is tense, yet uncertain, following the passing of former President Muhammadu Buhari. It has also reignited debates about power shift within the ruling APC and the future of opposition politics. With growing public frustration over governance and the seeming failure of traditional parties to deliver real change, there's been a renewed interest in coalition politics and emerging parties like the ADC. Yet, ideological fragmentation and regional divisions remain deep-rooted obstacles. In this episode, we speak to Aisha Yesufu, an influential Nigerian activist, social critic, and businesswoman widely recognized for her relentless advocacy for justice and equality and human rights. Together, we explore what true people-powered politics could look like and ask whether genuine change is still possible from within or only outside the system. Ms. Aisha Yesufu, thank you so much for joining us today on the episode, ma'am.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you so much, Ms. Aisha, for joining us. And I want to just get into the conversation. I mean, during my introduction, I spoke about the fact that you are a very influential Nigerian activist and social critic. So for me, the very first question today is, what is your overall assessment of Nigeria's current state of affairs right now? Like, where are we at? Passing, failing, excelling, managing, struggling? Where exactly are we?
On the issue of the current state of Nigeria right now, it's heartbreaking. For me, that's what I'm going to use because Nigeria is such an amazing country with so much potential, and have citizens who are audacious, who are talented, who are educated, who are intellectual, and then at the end of the day, we are operating below par. So it's really heartbreaking seeing where we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be this great, amazing country, but unfortunately, we're here struggling. We're looking at countries that are like even states that are less than states in our country be the ones to beat us to certain things. I'll just describe it as heartbreaking.
Wow, that is definitely something, and I'm sure there are lots of people that are going to agree with your assessment of everything. And I think I just want to move forward because we have a lot of very daunting problems affecting the country right now. Some people think some issues are bigger than some issues. Some people think something should get first priority. But you, as someone that you're in the thick of the situation, you're always in touch with what's going on and what's happening. So, in your opinion, what are the most pressing issues that require our urgent attention in Nigeria today, both as citizens and the government?
I think the first thing that requires our immediate and urgent attention will be on the state of insecurity in the country. We need to improve this security. We need to ensure that every part of Nigeria is properly governed. We have too many ungoverned spaces, and we've allowed non-state actors to actually roam and take over these places. Security is really affecting everything that we do. In terms of even our food security is a major thing. One of the questions I've constantly raised is the fact that it seems as if there is a synchronized attack on Nigerians' food security because the states that are usually the food basket of the nation or their state are being attacked. You look at Sokoto, you're looking at Zamfara, you're looking at Nasarawa, Plateau, Benue, Niger, Borno. And you go down to south, other places like Edo State. Edo North is the food basket of Edo State, and it's under siege. So this is something that really should worry all of us. And then with the insecurity, a lot of our mineral resources are being stolen, are being taken away, by these bandits and all of that. That's one thing, one pressing thing. The next one, of course, would be in terms of education. We need to ensure that the human capital, is given the right priority. Education, health, you name it. Education and a population that is uneducated is a dangerous, population, and we cannot afford that. So it's very important for there to be focus, on education. There are a whole lot of other things you look at. In terms of the security agencies that we have, there need to be a restructure, which will also be under tackling insecurity. Also, the civil service, we really need to revamp it and bring it up to par. There are so many other things, but I'm just going to stop here.
I feel like you really pressed on some of the vital issues right there because I can count at least three different issues that you mentioned there. You spoke about security, you spoke about the food that we are also having to face, yeah, the food insecurity, and so many other aspects of it. And I feel like those ones definitely, because if we can fix insecurity, there are so many things that we would not be worried about or will not be concerned about. Ms. Hafsa, are you ready for the next question?
Well, my question was around, the state of activism, especially in terms of youth engagement in the Nigerian political space. And, you are at the forefront of Nigerian activism. To me, you're like the face of the activism in Nigeria. You have been doing it so well. I really have to commend you. I've read and I've seen you speak about how you started off in this journey. However, the youth have seem to have a serious challenge in terms of focusing on courses, and there's a lot of distractions. For example, I'm going to bring up the NSAS movement. Of course, the NSAS movement was a very formidable movement. It garnered so much attention globally, and you are also at the forefront of that movement. However, with all the successes that it has achieved in terms of advocacy and awareness in terms of the issues that Nigeria faces, there seem to have been a little bit of disorganizing in terms of the leadership. There wasn't structured leadership to the movement, and we see a lot of issues in other movements in Nigeria, by the way, that youth bring up, which makes it vulnerable and more susceptible for all types of actors to come into and disfigure in a way. I really wanted you to shed some light in terms of how youth can be more educated in starting movements and sustaining movements from online to actually achieving the course that they want.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. So for me personally, when it comes to advocacy, I think it's something that I've done all my life. Even as a very little girl, I've always stood up against what is wrong and insist on the right being done. And I've always been vocal, even though it got me into lots of trouble. I got a lot of beatings for that. My first protest I just was in 1992 in the university. But after the on national issues, I never said anything because for me, focusing on my businesses and getting financial independence was quite critical for me. You know how it is in Nigeria. If you're poor, you're nameless, faceless, and voiceless. You're not seen as a human being. During election, you're only important once every 4 years when they need your thumbprint. And it's not the whole of you that is important, it's just the thumbprint. And so on my 40th birthday, I decided that I would no longer be silent. I realized rather that I was one of the problems of Nigeria because I remember as a child, I used to, ask my dad, why are you quiet? Why are you allowing those people, with the corruption that was going on, a lot of mismanagement of the economy, suffering. Why are you silent? You are adults. These people are adults. Why are you silent? And so my 40th birthday, I too had become silent. So I vowed on that day that if God gives me 40 more years, that I was going to devote it to Nigeria. 4 months after that, Chibok girls were abducted, and I came out. And it's been one thing or the other over there. In terms of looking at the NSAS was structured in a way that we didn't have the kind of traditional kind of leadership that we all are familiar with, which is, sort of like the horizontal leadership. You have someone who is at the top, you have subordinates, instruction comes from up, down, and all of that. What they had was a vertical leadership where people could take up different areas and do certain things that they were good at. And then you didn't have one person that you were going to hold. And this was coming from the people learning. They learned from what had happened before in terms of the Occupy Nigeria movement, where there was leadership. And, when there's a leadership, the government is able to either co-opt the leaders or arrest them or intimidate them. And then at the end of the day, the whole movement, scattered. So that was one of the reasons why they did that. And they had their demands, and the demands were there and everything. At the end of the day, we saw the tragedy of what happened when soldiers were sent in to kill protesters at that level. Yes, the NSAS, as a movement. It's not like it's continuous as a movement that the people are there operating, but it also metamorphosed into politics. And I want to just explain this whole thing. Before NSAS, a lot of the youth didn't bother about politics or governance or what was happening in the country. They had their social media, they could control information, they could control the way they make their own money. Some of them weren't dependent on government to make their money. A lot of them were entrepreneurs. Ivy League educated, middle class, and middle class, and all of that. And they were the ones who were mostly affected by SARS. So the end SARS protest, like my friend said, was a protest of survivor. Most of them were victims, some of them victims many times over, and the others had loved ones who had been victim. Either they had lost their loved ones or what. So it was a passionate kind of a protest. And you find out that it was more of, like I said earlier, the middle class, educated entrepreneurs. They had their thing, even though they were young. And so they could organize themselves. They could do this whole thing that they did. And so they weren't bothered about politics. Good number of them, they were very young when we still had military. And as of that time, I think the Nigerian democracy, uninterrupted democracy, was like 21 years. And so you had those people who didn't bother. All of a sudden, boom, government now comes to attack them, to kill them. They now realize, oh my goodness, the government can be this brutal. And there was the mockery that was coming from the politicians that were saying to them, if you don't like what is happening, change us. And so with that, they now were like, okay, we'll do this. And that was what metamorphosed into what we saw in the 2023 election, where a lot of youth were interested and invested in the politics. So if you look at the correlation, you see how it went in. They now started, okay, in terms of getting people registered and all of that. So it went that way. On the issue of activism, the advocacy in general in Nigeria, even though the civic space is being shrunken, it has shrunk, but one of the things for me that really gladdens me is the fact that a lot more people are finding their voices. We're having a lot of youth knowing that this is an issue and taking it on. Even if it's on social media, and they've been able to force government to do the right thing just by them coming out to make those demands and let there be outcry. I think just an example, I can't remember the university now, a particular university just brought out some dressing code, this thing. And people got angry about that, and they made demands, and there was a lot of outcry, and they are coming to say, oh no, that's not the right. And these are some of the things where these demands come in. Yeah, I do agree that there are a lot of distraction, but there are also a lot of problems. So sometimes you're solving one problem, there's an outcry, you're demanding one thing, before you know what's happening, another one is coming out. It's almost as if it's deliberate, it's being done deliberately to sap the energy of the people. But overall, I would say, even though the civic space has shrunk, overall, I would say that there are more people now who understand their right to speak, and they're speaking, even though, yes, we have a lot of intolerance from those in government in terms of the way they indiscriminately just arresting people if you just say something or the other. Before I started this, I was just watching a video where it was reported that someone who had said that Mr. Tinubu had died or something had just been arrested. And I'm like, you just arrest this person, but why haven't you arrested the Senate president and the governor? I think there was the governor of Imo State, who literally were saying that, oh, you had been buried. Mr. Tinubu had been buried. Even though it was a slip of tongue and they went on to correct it, but they did say it. Why are you going after someone just because you can? And there are a lot of, things like that. Someone has been thrown into jail just because they said, oh, a former first lady had put on weight. We have someone also, Scott Eguma, who all he did was to show a particular housing estate business, say that it's fraud. They were defrauding people, and the SEC, this, I think that the Security Exchange Commission, had also warned people that the way the activities of this particular company was going looked as if it was a Ponzi scheme. But this particular person who is pointing out the ills of this company ended up being the one that is arrested. So I think, for me, I think that the Nigerian youth are doing so much more than they did before in terms of the voices that they are putting in on issue. But somehow also we have so many of this issue. And what I implore to everyone is for every one of us to be active citizens. Let's not be passive. Be part of it. Put your voice, lend your voice. You can lend your voice in different ways. You don't have to be on the streets to lend your voice. You can tweet, you can sing, you can talk about it. Find a way, but silence shouldn't be an option.
Yeah, thank you so much for that brilliant answer. And just like you said, you can lend your voice and be active. Well, I'm proud to say that I Am Change Organizations has followed through in terms of that. Last year, with the support of Nigerian Youth Futures Fund, we organized a program, Youth in Civic Action. And also, It Starts With Me. That's the title of the program. It Starts With Me, Youth in Civic Action, where we trained youth in civic education. We trained secondary school students on the democratic system and the civic education, as well as media literacy trainings that we embarked on last year. It's definitely taking action and also lending your voice and understanding your role as a citizen and your responsibilities in a democratic system. All citizens have responsibilities as well, and you have really put yourself out there on the line. It's very admirable, and we're glad to have role models like you in the society. You beat all types of odds as a woman, hijabi warrior woman, out there. It's very, very admirable.
Thank you so much.
That was really powerful listening to you talk about what the youth have been doing. And I really liked when you spoke about the fact that even though they are trying to talk about all of these things, it feels like there are multiple issues coming at us all at the same time. Thank you. And also for the call at the end for people to get involved. I think I want to talk about something powerful that you did during the week. During the week, you physically walked with Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan into the Senate House after she was blocked from entering, turning what could have been a very quiet reinstatement into a very powerful statement. Do you think it would take such visible and bold acts of clear defiance for women to actually take their space when it comes to the politics in Nigeria?
Yeah, so that's like the program that you organize. It begins with me. That's such a powerful thing. It takes one away from being passive to a place where one is active, when you know that at the end of the day it begins with me. You're not waiting for anybody, because most times what we do is that we think that there's someone else who is going to do the problem, who is going to solve the problem. I'm going to say yes, it does require bold actions and defiance for us to be able to get women in there. One of the things that we almost understand is that as women, there's so many battles we're fighting. It's like you're doing a race and then they begin to put boulders on you and stop you, and you're unable to move forward as much as you can. And the first thing also that we need to do is to mentally prepare ourselves, remove those voices that had been planted in our heads that said we are not enough, that said we can't be there, we can't be in certain rooms, we can't do certain things. We need to, first of all, be able to remove those voices from our heads. And then we also have to understand that we are enough and we have a place on this earth that is created for us. And at every table that there is in this nation, we have a place at the table, and we can sit at that table and we can be part of decision makers. And irrespective of what anyone says, and we must be very mindful not to allow anybody put us on certain pedestal and say, oh, women, you're not supposed to do this, or women, you're supposed to do that, or you should be in a certain way. No, we are human who have a right to be treated as human. So it's very important for us to do that. And then most importantly also is the participatory part. We have to participate. Participation. We can't stay away. Oh, it's difficult. Oh, we don't have money. Excuses are like shoes, and you always find the ones that fit. And so we must do away with the excuses. We must take on the issue head on. It doesn't matter if we fail a million times. What we must do is that we must rise up 1,000,001 times and keep going. And no matter what happens, when we stand up again, we just keep going. And I think as women, if we begin to understand this more and push ourselves in there and don't sell ourselves short, definitely we begin to get to that place where we occupy the seat. And when we see one of us being intimidated, for me, like I say, as far as I'm here by the grace of God, Natasha will not walk alone. I will walk with her. I will be there with her. Because for whatever injustice that is meted on her, it's not just her alone. It's all of us. It's all of us women. And they're doing that so as to send a message to all victims that if they can do this to, one of the most powerful positions that we have politically in Nigeria, to a woman who is occupying that, then who are you as a woman who is occupying nothing? They can't do everything to you. So for us, it's something we have to stand for with her. We have to find the unconstitutional suspension that has been put on her, and we must keep going on this whole issue.
Totally agree with you there. Yes, absolutely.
Thank you so much for the answer to that particular question, and I really look forward to the day where young women will be able to take control of being in the Senate. I feel like women in Nigeria need to really get into that space. And thank you for such a bold statement that you put out during the week. I would love to ask this: since the passing of the former President Muhammadu Buhari, there's been like a little bit of, I don't know, people not sure of what the political mood is. So my question is, how would you describe the political mood since following the death of the late president? And also, do you think that is going to mark any real turning point in how we do politics in this country, or even in democracy of Nigeria?
Yes, one of the things that our former President Muhammadu Buhari had was a following that was almost like cult-like. And it's like, this is someone who had a block. Let me put it as a voting block, rather. He had a block that was his, that was not attached to a party. So wherever he moved to, that block was ready to move with him. It's a voting block, and it was quite powerful. Even though the kind of hope and aspiration that voting block and a lot of people had before he got into office had a bit waned after he had gotten into office, because the expectation of the people weren't met the way the people wanted. But it was still a powerful voting block, and this was really his. And so as he went on into the politics, anybody that needed something needed to tap into that voting block, because even in 2015, you had a lot of people who got into office just because of the effect that he had. Another person who seemed to have that kind of, a sort of like cult-like following or voting block, if I may call it, it's also Peter Obi. So we are seeing Peter Obi now with that kind of a vote where he has people who are supporting him and not necessarily a party. Meanwhile, with other people, it's attached to sort of like, a party. Or for the ones who are for it, it's not significant enough for it to be a major voting block. And you've seen in the case of Mr. Peter Obi, a lot of people who are saying, look, this voting block is not transferable. It's not something that is transferable to another. That's the same thing you had with the Buhari voting block. And now that former President Muhammadu Buhari has passed, there's a huge significant change. And so there's going to be a reorganizing of who gets to own this voting block. And that's the conversation that is being had in the political terrain. And so there's everybody trying to put themselves as the successor or the inheritor of that particular voting block that Buhari had. And so there's that subtle, a fight for it. But there's also the question of whether, if the voting block is willing to attach itself to another person. So that's also a major issue that is going on. Looking at the northern side, since that particular politics, that particular dynamics, it's more related to the northern part of Nigeria than it is to the southern part of Nigeria, because our former President Muhammadu Buhari did not have as much, vote within the southern part of the country. And so, but what we have also, an interesting thing that is coming on, is that particular voting block is made up of the older generation, or even though there are a bit of younger one, but it's more of the older generation. And now we have a newer generation, a younger generation that really are not bothered. They are not part of that voting bloc. And so they are open for anyone to be able to, impress them enough or motivate them enough for them to see that person as a leader. One of the things also that's happening within the political terrain is that we're having the last of the Gen Zs now being able to vote. As we go into 2027, the last of the Gen Zs, the youngest of the Gen Zs will now be able to vote. And you're having the oldest of the Gen Alpha. They are not able to vote, but they are going to be around 17, 16, 17 and thereabout. And so this is a whole lot of a different ball game of people who even if you have the ones who are not educated, social media is there. They might not be educated in terms of, having gone to formal education and all of that, or Islamic education, but they're getting their education from social media. A lot of them are on TikTok, a lot of them are on Twitter, Facebook, and all of that. And so it's a huge potential for anyone who decides to engage them and get them from that distraction and make them focus on it. So the next few polities are going to be very interesting. But most interesting for me, one of the things that, and I'm going to say it here, that worries me a lot is that the current set of politicians that we have that have held the country to ransom, they're growing old. They're getting older, they're getting weaker, they're phasing out. But what they're doing is that they're trying to hand over to their children. And I think whatever we do, and whatever the citizens, the electorate do, they must not allow that handover to happen. So within the period that handover is supposed to happen, there's going to be a bit of a lacuna, and they must take advantage of that and wrest power from these people who have held the country to ransom. So that power now begins to go to whoever is competent with character and have capacity. So it becomes truly democratic. Because if we allow the exchange to happen where they're handing over to their children, then that will be tantamount to the same kind of mistake that we made, my generation and older made, when in 1999, when the military were handing over to civilians, most of the people who had fought for the democracy, most of the people who were supposed to lead, thought the military were joking, they wouldn't hand over, and they refused to participate in the process. And then nature abhors vacuum. And the people who ordinarily would not have entered, they got into power. By 2003, when those people were coming in to try to now wrest power, these other people who have held the country down and were able to use violence and all of that to keep those people away. If we allow the handover to the children of these current politicians that have held the country ransom, what we're going to have them. They will be very vicious. As far as they are concerned, Nigeria's commonwealth is their commonwealth. They are Ivy League. They have their tech savvy. They have social media, whatever, and they don't have empathy for the poor. So it might take another 3-4 decades before you are able to wrest power from the same people. And we already see the alignment where the politicians are putting their children in certain places. And I think this is the time for citizens to actually sit up and participate in politics, because it is through politics that those who govern us will come.
Excellent answer. And this brings me back to the question that I asked about citizens' responsibilities and the role of citizens. Just like you said, ma'am, you can't expect power to be handed over to you. The current crop of leaders and people in power are not going to hand over power to the, average person in the political system. So it has to be taken. I think there's a quote that says power has to be taken. It's not given. It has to be taken. So, it just is left for the class of people that you mentioned that have already succeeded in some of these movements and also succeeded in creating awareness for change to step in and be responsible. Because to be fair, there's a lot of irresponsibility going on in the civic space and political space in Nigeria. The youth, like you said, there's a lot to commend the youth on, but there's also so much distraction that you see in the youth. There's this word that is being used, slacktivism, where it's just like online activity that doesn't follow through in terms of taking action and implementation. Everything is just done online. And even online, what you see is that there's so much sensationalism going on online. There's not like a lot of critical thinking behind some of these discussions and debates. In fact, I don't really see a lot of debates going on. I'm glad that, of course, you're like a pillar of the Obi movement. And there was a space that Mr. Peter held, which actually happened on your own account because I think there were some activities trying to sabotage
Yeah.
the space. I think that in recent times, that's one of the first, this year at least, my first engagement with any of Peter Obi's activities. So I listened to the whole space. And one thing I've realized with Mr. Peter Obi is that he doesn't engage in mudslinging politics. He's
No, no, he
always
doesn't.
talking about, yeah, he doesn't. He never. A lot of politicians, they attack. It really, really irritates me and annoys me. This immaturity about mudslinging, attacks, insults. But you know what? The Nigerian politicians are very, very smart. They understand that that is what excites the people. That's what they like to see. It excites them. They're happy. This type of attitudes and whatnot amongst ourselves. I'm sorry to say there's a lot of immaturity in terms of these things. So it excites them. But Mr. Peter Obi speaks about issues, he talks about policies, examples, and whatnot. But what I was going to say is that in the followers, you see, there's a lot of back and forth with other things, which is normal in terms of followers and political. And we really need to have like critical debates, policies, so that power would not be handed over to the next of kin from the ones in power now, so that citizens will take power and do the right thing. We need change. We need to have positive change in place. And without that responsibility, it's not going to happen. So that's my addition to your brilliant answer.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Citizens need to be active. There are two sides of governance: demand side and supply side, as Dr. Obi Ezekwesili would say. But unfortunately, even we as the citizens, we have failed. It's not just the politicians that are failing. We as citizens are also failing because we are not doing the things that we are supposed to do. We are supposed to demand for good governance. We don't do it. And so if you don't demand for good governance, the easiest thing that is there to give is to give bad governance. And one thing is that our politicians are they are very intelligent and they do work hard. That's what I tell people. They work hard. They can't work
Yeah.
for this. You are sleeping at home, you're playing, you're joking, and then it's only when election come you pay attention. You just go and put your thumbprint and go home, and you think that you're going to take that power away from them. No, they work hard. And sometimes I also say, do we even have the moral justification to be angry at politicians when they are corrupt? Because when they are running for election, we don't donate to their campaigns. We expect them to bring their monies, and sometimes they even have to pay the voters for them to vote for them. They have to buy things for them. You want to do politics, they are telling you, oh, you must go and either be building boreholes, be doing this, you must bring so amount of money. If you bring all of this money, it's no longer politics, it's now business, it's an entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
And when you do business, you must get your money back, you must get profit on the money, and then you must save the one that you use for the next time. So even we as citizens, I think we need to do better.
I love that you ended it on the note that citizens must do better, and I really, really like that. And I think this is going to take me to our very last question because I know that we have very few minutes left, and that is to the conversation of the new party that has come up in Nigeria. The coalition, the African Democratic Congress, the ADC, is beginning to gain some attention. And from you looking at it, where you're seated, looking at the political scene and everything, do you see the ADC as a viable third force party, as a serious contender, or do you think that will still be constricted to the APC PDP politics?
Oh, okay. Thank you so much for that question. I think it's quite an interesting one. First of all, the ADC is a coalition of different parties and different individuals, adopting ADC as the party for 2027 election. And we've seen a lot of people that have gotten into ADC, even though sometimes it's how do I put it, a gathering of strange bedfellows, right? There are people that you're like, oh my goodness, why am I even here with this person? But like what I've said to a lot of people is that look, we are not friends, but we have a common enemy. And that's the thing that it's bringing us together. And on this issue, since there's an alignment to do, good for Nigeria, that's what is holding that fabric down. And even in the case of PDP, a lot of people have left PDP, a lot of structures that they have, and they've taken it over, to ADC. So I see ADC as a real contender, and it also depends on them. So this is the thing with the ADC. This is not the time of saying, "Oh, just do it anyhow. Let's just take a chance. Let's just do vote and put someone." This is the time to be very strategic and say, who is it that you're going to put in that citizens are going to be excited enough for them to come out? Because don't forget, a lot of people are overwhelmed. There's despondency in the country. People just feel that this thing, we can't fight this thing because for the last how many years, things just kept getting worse. I mean, in 2015, we're on the streets because things weren't good. And then Buhari came in, things worsened. And he was re-elected, it worsened. And then now you have a Tinubu in, and things have worsened again. So when you're telling people that there's a future that can be better, they can't even understand it. And so what you don't want is voters' apathy, where people are saying, oh, we don't want to come out. But if the ADC is able to put that candidate that we motivate people to come out, motivate people to spend their own money, motivate people to vote and protect their votes and escort their votes and stand and not allow anybody do anything to that vote, then they have a huge chance of winning the election, because the suffering in the land has really dealt with everybody. And so that whole thing about religion, tribalism that is always being used, it's reducing a little bit, because as much as possible, the money you used to buy 3 cups of rice that will feed your family, now you can only buy 1 cup of rice for you. And I tell you, if you sprinkle a bit of Muslim ticket and a bit of Emilokon ticket, it's not going to increase the volume of the rice. So you're not going to have enough to still feed your family. So now everybody is getting that sense that it's not about religion, it's not about tribe, it's about getting a candidate who has competence, character, capacity, and most especially empathy, who feels the pain of the people. I want someone who is ambitious in the way that they want to make a name for themselves. They want to do so well that they will be referred to in the future as, oh, these people are great people who have worked for Nigeria. And I think that's what we need to focus on. But most importantly also, is for young people and young women to get into these political spaces. If it's ADC, the party, join these parties, run for office. Even if you fail the first time, keep going, keep running. And one other thing I must add is that if we really want to get this thing done in terms of getting young people, women into office, we need a war chest. A war chest in terms of money. And I always say, if 1 million Nigerians come together and decide to donate 1,000 naira every month, that's going to be 1 billion naira. In 1 year, it's going to be 12 billion. In 4 years, it's going to be 48 billion. That 48 billion can help to send a lot of people into the National Assembly and State Houses of Assembly, because that's where the real power is, and that's where you can start. For the executive, it's really quite expensive trying to take over. So why don't you start with the legislative and get people in there? It doesn't have to be at once a lot of people, little by little. If you have a bucket of dirty water and a bucket of clean water, you keep taking away a cup of the dirty water and throwing it away and putting a cup of clean water into it, sooner or later that dirty water is going to turn clean. And so that's what we are going to do. When people say politics is dirty, they must understand that if they don't do politics, that same politics that they think is dirty is going to dirty their life. Do we want that? Thank you.
Your last statement was very powerful. If you keep saying politics is dirty, it's most likely going to dirty your life. Wow. It has been very interesting having you on.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Yesufu, for agreeing to join I Am Change podcast. It has been a very enlightening and exciting podcast episode. And we wish you all the best in your future endeavors, and hope to have you again sometime. Thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me on Change Podcast. Thank you.
That was a power-packed conversation with Aisha Yesufu and my co-host Hafsatu Shinkafi. Do listen to episodes of I Am Change podcast on any of your favorite podcast listening platforms and watch the full video of this particular episode on YouTube on our channel I Am Change podcast, and don't forget to join the conversation using the hashtag I Am Change podcast. How can we truly be active citizens? Drop your comments and we'll be sure to read them. Thank you for listening.
Listen now to I Am Change podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform.